Good afternoon, everyone on the East Coast, and good morning, everyone on the West Coast. This is John Garmendi, Senior Business Development Manager with Sony's Professional Solutions. I want to thank you again for joining us today in our ongoing series of Tech Tuesday webinars in response to the current COVID situation and in an effort to provide our channel partners, consultants, and end users with a consistent flow of information about Sony's products and solutions. Today's webinar will provide an overview of the award-winning REA C1000 Edge Analytics appliance and a demonstration of the handwriting extraction feature of this device. We're proud to say that the REA C1000 was voted Best in Show, Last Infocom by AV Technology Magazine, and also won the Sound and Video Contractor Innovative Product Award for Infocom of last year as well. A couple of housekeeping items. Please submit any questions you may have. And starting with today's webinar, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but you can now register for all future webinars at once. So joining me today will be Drew Buttress, Senior Product Manager, and our primary presenter, Karim Springer. Karim is a sales support engineer in covering Sony's Northeast region. Karim has close to 15 years of AV and broadcast industry experience, and he'll be the primary presenter for today. And with that, I will turn it over to Karim, and I'll be back for questions later.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Sony Tech Tuesday. My name is Karim Springer. I'm a sales support engineer based here in New Jersey that supports Sony B2B products and solutions throughout the Northeast territory. As many of you are asking yourself, what is Edge Analytics and how it will benefit your organization? Well, let me answer that question for you. Edge Analytics is an AI-driven GPU video appliance, and the way it will benefit your organization is by transforming the way you do live presentations, distance learning, and PT camera tracking, and that's just to name a few. The Edge Analytics appliance, the REA C1000, is a scalable device allowing you to load up to 5 licenses. Those licenses are handwriting extraction, which allows for a digital overlay of characters being written on a whiteboard, PTZ auto tracking, which allows for a PTZ camera connected to your Edge Analytics system to track an individual across a fixed field area view, close-up by gesture, which allows for an audience-facing camera to actually capture the response of the individual as they stand up or raise their hand. Chroma keyless CG overlay allows for a digital background to be replaced instead of using a green screen or any additional lighting. And focus area cropping is basically a full angle of interest and a 10 by 80 cutout. I'm going to explain a little bit more details of each one of these licenses in more detail. Starting off with handwriting extraction, today we'll be doing a live demo with this application. Handwriting extraction allows for a digital overlay using a whiteboard or blackboard. This particular application is a great application tool for distance learning. PTZ auto tracking, great tool for actually following an individual. It's great because there's no need for a lanyard or any external device or loading up of any profile picture. How this works, the Edge Analytics device uses 4 areas of recognition: motion, facial, shape, and color patterns of an individual shirt. Chroma keyless CG overlay. Again, this allows for, let's say, a meteorologist to use a digital background without the need of a green screen or any special lighting. What's great about this application, it doesn't only apply to the broadcast industry, it can be also used for CEO messaging, webinars, live interviews, and online lessons. And focus area cropping, another great application tool to be used in houses of worship. Whereas on 2 monitors, on monitor A, you will have the whole angle of interest. So picture you have the congregation, the stage, and the pastor on one monitor, and then on monitor B, you'll have that close-up, that fixed area of either the podium or the pastor. So let's do a little bit of a recap on the different applications and use cases we could actually use Edge Analytics with. For presentations, focus area cropping. Lectures, definitely PTZ camera tracking. And for courses, handwriting extraction, which we'll be doing a live demo of today. Now that we talked a little bit about our licenses and the different applications we can use it on, let's talk a little bit about what's required. First, you'll need a PTZ network-capable HDMI output camera. Then you'll need the Edge Analytics, the REA C1000 main appliance, and a video output. It could be either a digital display or projector. A control PC is required at the beginning stages simply for configuration purposes. The Edge Analytics appliance comes with a standard backplane, 2 HDMI inputs, 2 HDMI outputs. HDMI 1 does up to full 4K, whereas HDMI 2 does up to full HD. You also have an RJ45 network port, which is great for configuration of the system and IP streaming. There's also a 3.5 millimeter port, audio input port on the back of the box. This allows for the audio to be embedded and sent out either over the HDMI output or via the network port doing IP streaming with an RTSP push. All our legacy cameras are supported to work with the Edge Analytics system. In addition to our legacy cameras, we also incorporated our newer NDI-capable X-Series cameras, which is the BRC X400, the SRG X400, and the SRG X120. With the impact of COVID-19, we are seeing a lot of middle schools, high schools, and higher ed closing their doors for the remainder of the academic school year. This is forcing a lot of students to do more coursework online. This creates a huge challenge for individuals that require some form of visual style of learning. As you can see on this slide, Edge Analytics offers all those benefits to conduct distance learning at a relatively cheaper cost, using less equipment and less setup time. I encourage everybody to reach out to your account manager or AV integrator to talk about some ongoing or current promotions that we have today. Now with that, I'm going to transition and do a live demo of the handwriting extraction application. Now, the first thing you'll like to do is actually open up a Chrome browser, type in the IP address. I have it's saved on my desktop as a tab. Sign in. And this will bring you to your main user interface page. You'll notice that on the top left-hand corner, you have applications. Right below that, I like to call those my function tabs. And right in the middle, I have my application selection, setup and run. Run is for the case that once you're completed setting this up, you don't have to go back and reconfigure the system. So in this particular case, I'm going to hit setup. Now, 3 main points you need to remember when configuring the handwriting extraction application. Whether this is a whiteboard or blackboard, in this particular case, I'm using a whiteboard. Adjust your 4 focal points, as seen right here. I'm going to leave it because I like the way it is. You can set this at any point, length or width of your whiteboard. It's all dependent on you. You don't have to take up the whole whiteboard. In my particular case, I'm going to use the entire whiteboard. And last, all the way at the bottom, you could adjust your transparency. Right now, I'm going to leave it at 25% for the demonstration purposes. So I hit next. This brings you to your second page. On your second page, I like to call this my reconfirmation page. So with this, you'll adjust your PTZ camera as you see fit, make it smaller, make it bigger. It's all dependent on you. Right now, for the demonstration purposes, I'm going to leave it the way it is, and then I'm going to hit done. That's all that's needed to set up your Edge Analytics system. Now you'll notice that I'm able to walk in front of the whiteboard. I'm wearing a dark color shirt too, so it's not impacting any of the colors that's written on the whiteboard. And I'm gonna just write on the whiteboard a little bit. I'm using any kind of markers, nothing fancy. You can pick this up at your local convenience store. Now you'll notice that immediately as the camera picks it up, it highlights it, and it creates it as a digital overlay. I could then come back, walk in front of it, and you'll notice the digital overlay. Again, color of my shirt is a dark color. It's really not impacting any of the colors that's written on the whiteboard. So I'm just gonna take a screenshot because this is another great tool to use. And I'll explain how the screenshots work a little later on in this demo. I go back to my whiteboard, and if I erase, the camera picks it up, and then it's gone. So let me explain a little bit of how this works, the workflow. The camera recognizes characters on the board and the characters that's being erased from the board, send that information over the HDMI output of the camera to the Edge Analytics box. The Edge Analytics box then takes that information, processes it, and sends it out over the HDMI output of the Edge Analytics system to your video monitor. So now I'm gonna bump my transparency up to 50%. Now that you notice it created a more wider area, you still see me. Again, you still see the colors. So let's just go ahead and write. Get that move out the way. The camera picks it up, sends that information over the HDMI output to your analytics box. The Edge Analytics box does its magic and sends it out to your external display. So before I erase it, I'm just gonna grab another screenshot here. And then I'm gonna erase. You'll notice that it takes a second for the camera to recognize it and sends the information over. So now, last, I'm gonna bump my transparency all the way up to 100%. With the transparency levels bumped all the way up to 100%, you'll notice that you can see me on the side outside of the fixed field of view that I set in my configuration. However, if I stand in front of the whiteboard, I'm no longer seen. Stand to the other side, again, I'm capable of being seen. So let's write on the whiteboard once again. Again, characters are highlighted. I'm gonna just take another screenshot here. And drop my transparency back down to 25%. Okay. So let's do a little bit of a recap. What is this? The Edge Analytics appliance. We're using a handwriting extraction application. what's required? A PTZ camera with an HDMI output, a video monitor or projector, and a whiteboard and a blackboard. And don't forget your markers, your great cheap and expensive markers that you can pick up. With that, I'm going to open and send it back to John Garmendi for any of your questions that I can answer. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you very much, Karim. Great job. Impressive device for sure. We do have several questions coming in, and I think you might have mentioned it, but maybe you can reconfirm. Jared asks, does handwriting extraction work also on a blackboard? I know your demonstration was on a whiteboard.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. Yes, it does work on whiteboards and blackboards as well. When you go into a blackboard, in the web GUI, you have the ability to select for colors just in case you have different type of chalks, different color chalks. So yes, you can use it on a whiteboard and a blackboard and still have that colored feature as well.
Okay, we have a question. We have a question from James, and he's asking, what kind of display is the camera displaying to? Projector screen or a monitor?
It can be projected to either one of those devices as long as there's an HDMI input.
Great. From Charles, we have a question. Do you have an API document?
I'm going to hand that one over to our product manager, Drew. If you could just chime in on that one.
Yep, the answer to that one is yes. We do have an API document.
And right now on the chat screen, I'm going to send to everyone in the audience a web link to our Sony Professional site, where we have the complete layout of the Edge Analytics in detail, including a number of resources and downloads. There's architects and engineering documents, 3D CAD documents, some outline views, and also a knowledge section with a good amount of technical documentation as well. So Kevin asks about the list price. Kevin, we would refer you to your local Sony account manager or your local reseller channel partner. The reason being is it's a configurable device. As you saw, there are a number of licenses that allow you to configure the device as needed for your particular applications. Another question from Kevin: does it work with any brand pan tilt zoom camera?
I can answer that one.
Okay.
So for PTZ auto tracking, the answer is no. It has to be a Sony PTZ camera that does VISCA over IP control and does HDMI output to be able to output the video into the Edge appliance. The other applications can use any camera with an HDMI output, but for PTZ auto tracking, it has to be a Sony PTZ.
Thank you, Drew. We have a question from Rob. Can the handwriting extraction license be used in conjunction with some of the other available licenses, such as motion tracking?
I'll answer that one. I'll answer that one too. Yeah, the answer is no, because if you saw in the demonstration with the handwriting extraction, Karim defined the four corners of the whiteboard. If you were then trying to do auto tracking again with the single camera, what would happen is you lose those reference points. So you have to think of the Edge appliance as a single threaded computing device. You have a single camera, single Edge, single license. If you wanted to have tracking going on and handwriting extraction, it would require two separate systems. So two Edges, two different licenses, and two cameras.
Thank you, Drew. We have a question from Jose. Can this be used with VC Systems XG100? Jose, I'm not sure. I'm assuming that that's another camera, and I think Drew kind of covered that in the previous question. I'm not familiar with that particular camera. Next question. Kevin asks, is this presentation available as a linked recording? Kevin, yes, we will post this once we complete the webinar. We might have to do some touch-up editing, but we will post this to the Sony site, and we can send you a link to that when it's available. Question from Allah. Can you go back to the slide that shows how the device recognizes the data?
I'm assuming that would be your, okay. So basically the video workflow, or how it takes the information from the PTZ camera and sends it over to HDMI output to your Edge Analytics box, and the Edge Analytics box processes all that information and sends it out to an external display. I'm not sure if that completely answers your question.
Let's see. No, he says no, it does not answer his question. Allah, can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on what exactly it is you're looking for? And while you're doing that, I will, to the camera process. So I think maybe, Karim, maybe he's asking about the, the 4 different types of facial recognition, shape recognition, color recognition, and so on.
So I will go into PTZ auto tracking. So when using PTZ auto tracking application, it's looking for 4 points of recognition. It's looking for motion of an individual, a facial recognition, shape of an individual, and also color patterns of a shirt. That's how it determines who's the primary presenter, and it tracks that individual.
Just to be clear, let me clarify. It's just face detection. It's not facial recognition like what you see in security-based systems. So the facial detection is you set up a detection zone. We detect the face, and then it kicks in these other tracking points that have already been mentioned. So the motion, the shape and size, color and pattern, etc.
Thanks, Drew and Karim. Appreciate the clarification. We have a follow-up question from Mike. He says, to clarify a previous question, the REA C1000 can only run 1 license at a time.
That is correct. You can only utilize 1 application at a time.
You could certainly purchase and install all the licenses and then change between the different applications, but in any given point in time, you're only running 1 application.
And we have a question from Chris. Is there any kind of handwriting correction for the screenshots? My understanding is no, but
no, there is not.
No. We do have a new feature. We've just released our version 3 firmware, and that actually offers a refresh button that can either be part of the API if you're using a Extron or Crestron controller, or if you're connected to the web UI like Karim was showing. You can refresh if the characters aren't being clearly picked up, and that could happen if the lighting isn't sufficient. So the refresh will let you refresh the screen, but we're not doing any kind of handwriting to text conversion.
Okay, great. We have a question from Brett. He asks, please tell me the model numbers of those recommended Sony PTZ cameras. Brett, if you take, we'll go back to that slide, but also if you take a look at the link I sent out on the chat, and you go to that site, there is a section there that has a PTZ cameras application guide, and that may help you as well. But go ahead, Karim. Talk about the cameras on the slide you have there.
Yes, basically all our legacy cameras, the BRC X1000, the BRC H800, the BRC, and all our SRG lineup, the 300, the 360, the 120DH are all supported. Those are the model numbers, as well as our newer NDI capable cameras, which are the X series cameras. Anything that has an X designation before the number, for instance, the ones labeled in red, the BRC X400, the SRG X400, and the SRG X120 are our newer NDI capable cameras.
Great. Have a question from Delwan. What format or file extensions are the screenshots, and what can they be used for?
The screenshots are JPEG images, and typically it could be used for if a presenter, teacher, instructor wants to go back and look at their notes that was actually written on the whiteboard, they could go back and retrieve that.
Question from Scott: is there a YouTube video of this demo? Not of. There, we do have a number of YouTube videos demonstrating Edge Analytics and a number of its different applications, different license features on YouTube, both from the Infocom show last year as well as ISE show of both last year and this. And you can find them pretty easily with a simple search. Ben asks, when will we see demos of the other 4 abilities? So Ben, it's our plan to, as part of the ongoing series of webinars, to be able to show you a number of the different applications. I think the next one that we have planned is PTZ tracking, and we're also going to go a little bit more deeply into the hardware setup and the web GUI overview as well. Another one from Delwan. Are the screenshots snapped at whatever opacity you have set, or are they all at 100% opacity?
All the screenshots are at 100%.
Okay, James asks, how many cameras can run at one time?
I'm going to go back to my system overview. But to answer your question, James, basically it's one camera feeding into one Edge Analytics system at one given time.
We have a question from Jose. He asks, is there any collaboration, I guess, planned? Is there any collaboration planned between multiple REAC 1000 devices on the Sony roadmap? Drew.
I don't believe so. I'm not quite sure I'm understanding the question, but if you wanted to have coordination of multiple edges in a room, for example, each edge has its own IP address, so you could set those up, have them on the network. Certainly, you'd be able to control them with a third-party controller. But again, to reemphasize, it would be a single camera, a single application running on each edge. So in terms of collaboration between multiple edges, I don't believe that we're heading in that direction. In other words, trying to split the video and doing different processing. So I'm not quite real clear on the question, but as far as I know, we don't have anything on the roadmap to do that.
A question from Corey. Can the Edge unit take the NDI input, or does it have to be HDMI?
So NDI is just a feature of the camera. Basically, the video feed has to be HDMI into the Edge.
Okay, a follow-up question from Allah. In some applications, I see splitter. Do you mean HDMI switch? And if the Edge unit's working only for one application, why do we need that splitter?
Well, I'll answer that one. In a classroom, you may want to put it on the display or projector, but then you may also want to send it to your recording system. Now, the Edge appliance does have a H.264 encoded video stream. It's sent via RTSP, and so some of the lecture capture systems would have the ability to ingest that IP stream, and you wouldn't need to split the video. In some cases, very large classrooms, they may want to put additional flat panel screens up along the sides of those large lecture halls, and then you would need a DA or splitter to feed the output video to those multiple screens.
Thanks, Drew. And let's see, we have quite a few questions here. Okay, Corey asks, if the Edge has two HDMI outputs available, is the content mirrored on both of them? Can the 4K out of the projected display and the other to a recorder? So I guess he's asking, well, you understand. Go ahead, Drew.
Well, okay, so we have to understand that the different applications are using the two outputs in different ways. So, focus area cropping, if we're using a 4K camera, then HDMI out 1 is going to be that raw 4K output literally from the camera. HDMI 2 would then be the focus area or the region of interest that you've defined, whether it's static or dynamic. In the case of close-up by gesture, I suspect you're seeing the same video out on both. I haven't tested two different outputs. PTZ auto tracking, it may just be HDMI 1 that's giving you the feed, and that's the straight output from the camera. Whether it's, well, you have to also understand, if you're using a 4K capable camera, then you need to use HDMI 1 for that 4K output.
Couple of things. I just sent out on the chat link a link to the YouTube video. So someone had asked for that. Also wanted to mention, just to remind everyone, if you're an end user on this call, by all means, please reach out to your local Sony dealer, and we can work together with them to provide you a demonstration of any of the features that you'd like to see more in detail. And for our channel partners here, we'd like to remind you that we can take this presentation and customize it for you and do it for a group of your end users as well. So back to the questions. Leslie asks, is the PTZ auto track feature, does the PTZ auto track feature only track one person at a time?
Yeah, the answer is yes.
Kevin asks, are the licenses permanent or annual?
They are one-time, lifetime license fees, so they're permanent.
Chris asks, could you use an HDMI switcher to add more cameras, or would that disrupt the workflow?
Yeah, if you are, Wow, that's a tough one to answer. I think it's going to disrupt your workflow. If you're auto tracking and you change to a different camera view, it wasn't part of the detection, and so um, the edge basically is sending Visca over IP commands to a specific IP address, and so switching the video input, you're not going to be tracking with the camera you think you are. Similarly, different angles for like handwriting extraction, it's going to give you a non-calibrated point of reference. So again, you really got to kind of think back. It's one camera. Even though there are two inputs, the second input is used, for example, in chroma keyless. That's where you would connect the background, and then you'd connect your laptop or PC to that second input, where that's your it could be a slideshow, a PowerPoint, it could be recorded video, like a movie or some video you've recorded that could be playing in that background. But in terms of using a video switcher to then input, it's going to disrupt the workflow.
Thanks, Drew. Let's see, getting close to time here, but we do have a couple more questions. John asks, is HDCP an issue?
That's a good question. Off the top of my head, I don't have an answer.
Hey, John, listen, we keep all of these questions and along with the contact information for the attendees. So we will research that question and get back to you. And let me just check here. I think we've hit all of the questions. Let me just double check. So I appreciate everyone spending the time again with Sony. I know you guys you're busy, and especially in these times, the ways that we are working have changed. And again, this is why we want to continue to provide you with information and updates on Sony products and solutions through these series of webinars. As always, we appreciate your feedback. If there are any topics in particular you'd like to see covered in the future, and again, remember, if you're an end user, please reach out to your local Sony dealer. If you are a channel partner, by all means, please get back to us and we can put something together specifically for your customers. With that, I'd like to thank you again for your time and look forward to speaking to everyone next week. Thanks all.